We are away from each other over a long distance. And I'm Amy Franceschini, and I'm part of a group called Futurefarmers, which I will introduce over this talk, the different configurations of it. And this talk will be a bit rough and ethereal because I wanted to really think about how radio and community radio has worked in our practice over the years. I wish I'm much better in person, but I will do my best across this distance. But I wanted to think about really this idea of how art is a medium between us and can be thought of as a medium to connect people, and to think about the space between us that we deal with every day, culturally, emotionally, weather, and what brings us together, what keeps us apart, and to think about the intricacies and intimacies of these spaces. And I wanted to just introduce where I am. So I'm sitting here in California on the Pacific Ocean. And I just wanted to show you this picture for a moment while I tune in to the National Weather Channel, which will tell you what's going on right now.
59-32, Redwood City, 61 and 39, 60 and 31, Fremont, 59 and 36, Concord, 59 and 36, Livermore, 59 and 35, San Rafael, 62 and 33, Napa, 59 and 31, Fairfield, 59 and 36. A metro area and the Santa Valley. For today, mostly sunny in the morning, then becoming sunny. Areas of fog in the morning. Highs from the 50s to mid-60s. Northwest winds around 5 miles per hour. For tonight, clear. Areas of frost after midnight.
Okay. So this is a VHF radio. Does anyone know what this is or have one? Raise your hand. No, okay. So this is kind of a very simple radio that is used in sailing and in very local communications, but it's a lifeline for sailing to get weather, to know what's going on in your very local proximity. So I'll show you a project later when we were sailing. This was like our basic lifeline, but we also had a different radio. And I love this. It's like a friend. You turn it on and it's always there. This person is always telling you what's going on. And what you're looking at here is off the shore of the town where I grew up, this large boat, which is very unusual. No boats ever come in this bay. And recently this huge boat came and everybody was like, what is this boat? It was there for 3 days. Could anybody imagine what this boat is?
No, what is it?
Someone must have an idea.
Fishing.
It does use lines.
It's military.
I would say that's involved. Okay, so if you look closer, the name of the boat is René Descartes. Does anybody know who René Descartes is?
Yes.
So he's this philosopher that came up with this, he's sort of famous for I think, therefore I am. And this boat is named after him. And it's a French company that is laying internet cable from the Pacific coast of California all the way to Thailand, which we're probably dependent on right now to connect each other. And so this was like, for me, proxemics collapsing, because I came from a very tiny town. No ships ever come. This ship's coming and laying down these international cables. And I thought the name of the boat was quite ironic. So I just wanted to situate you where I am in the world. And then Futurefarmers is basically, it's a network of people who come together to work on various projects in various places. And it started in 1994 in San Francisco, and it was predominantly a design studio and an artist in residency program. And so over the years, people from different countries have come through the studio, and that's what's really created this network of people we continue to work with. So this was just a map of people, places, and projects that make up Future Farmers. We did this map already 6 years ago, so that was 6 years ago. And then this idea of proxemics, if you haven't heard of it, it's actually a term by a sociologist named Edward T. Hall. And I was very interested in his work when I was a graduate student, and he had this idea of the familiar stranger. I don't know if anyone has heard of this, but I'm an only child. I didn't have brothers and sisters, so I spent a lot of time feeling alone and kind of seeking out familiar people in the world and making very clear notes of them. And this is a picture of a study he did at a bus stop. And so his idea of the familiar stranger is, if you live in a town and you pass by somebody every day, but you've never talked to them, but you know, like the guy who sits at the cafe reading a paper, he's there every day, but you never talk to him. It gives you this sense of familiarity, this sense of comfort that he's always there. If there was an earthquake, you'd probably talk to him. If there was a state of emergency, you might talk to him, but otherwise you don't. And I kind of liked this idea of this familiar stranger, because as we move around a lot as artists, when we come back to our hometown, I think you've all felt that feeling like, the person's still there at the cafe, I'm home. So I just wanted to introduce this. If any of you are interested in social proximity or sociology, Edward T. Hall is someone interesting to study. And this is going to, like I said, I'm going to jump around a lot because I don't know who you are, so I wanted to offer a lot of tidbits. I also wanted to just talk about a little bit of our method as Future Farmers. We are architects, anthropologists, writers, bakers, farmers, computer programmers, and I think we all think about what we're doing as a medium, as radio is a medium, and I mean that in a kind of ephemeral way and a tangible way. So it's a bit, radio is this stuff, it's there, and we claim it. We might use it for a moment, and then we let it go. It's moving, it's drifting, it can be interfered with. If a mountain is in your way, you can't access it. And I think we like this precarity of radio and the idea of a medium. And we like to think of it as a medium or a vessel. And I think we think of it as a vessel in this idea of a temporary containment of a situation, or moving something from one place to the next and making that tool to move things. So we've been writing some things lately, so I'll just read it. We think of art as a medium or a vessel. Instead of a production of a piece, we see art as a medium that connects connectors, conductors in the sense of electrical conductors in the radio, transistors, transformers, microphones. A medium in which people, things, plants, all species, all things can move, and literally move emotionally, and literally move policy, move dirt, move soil, but actually it's an active idea. Also, art as a network rather than a thing that links things and humans and plants in ways that were not intended. So I think community radio, I think you're doing that, is a beautiful medium because it is so hyper-local and so many things can happen. We also create tools to think about how we can connect and how we can make new combinations of connection. And so while we do make things, this is a telescoping antenna we made as a backpack to make recordings up high in the trees for a radio project we did in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. And this was also working with people of color, LGBT communities, and children to demystify the tools of making community radio and to give voice to the urban flora in Philadelphia, which was quite rare in this city, but we found some amazing places. And we also tried to think of art as a medium that touches and moves people physically and gives them the tools to act. So this we call a relational object, this backpack. And we think of it as a tool that gives people a agency to create their own medium. We also often work in trying to find a common imaginary in communities. This is, again, that project in Philadelphia where we were trying to think how we could bring people together that don't relate to forests in any way to start to plant a forest in Philadelphia. So this is a working group where we were thinking and voting on different ideas of how to do this. And I'm just showing these pictures to punctuate this idea of art as a medium of connectivity. This is a picture of a gathering, again, thinking together a community in Oslo, Norway, of how public commons can function socially, materially, and artistically. We walk through cities, so movement, again, is very important to think about for us, art as a transmission through space. This was a recent movement of apples through Brussels. I think Judith is somewhere there, yes. Dancing city. We also think of this vessel of art as, again, a mode of transmission. This is a container of seeds that were lost in history until 1970 and then brought back into production by farmers. And each of these seeds is a carrier of a story. It's been grown in a field of influence, like an electromagnetic field in the sky. We also have these fields of agriculture, and I'll talk about those too in a second. We work with other artists who are also interested in how we can use this electromagnetic field to influence each other. This is Caroline Profanter, Brussels sound artists, just working with what happens when you bring two radios together and they interfere and you can no longer hear the intended sonification that you had broadcast. So often we work with the interference in radio as an actual medium. And then again, thinking about what tools can we give people where they can perform themselves and connect in new ways. This was a xylophone we made that came from a pile of ideas we had, and we laid them out and it became an instrument. So how can your tools morph and change depending on what you're trying to do with them? Okay, so I wanted to just, maybe this is a bit more detailed than you wanted, but I wanted to think about radio, and I don't really know what you're trying to do in your 2-day workshop, but I think I'll just share some ideas of radio that interest us. So we're interested in this idea of radio and farming and overlapping metaphors. So if you think of broadcasting, of course, you're broadcasting radio, you're temporarily moving along the frequencies. And if you think about the word, it actually, in English, I don't know, in Italian, it actually also means to sow seeds. So if you think of this Van Gogh painting, this farmer is sowing seeds, but he's sowing seeds in a very chaotic way. In the industrialized farming, you're doing it in rows and there's a strict logic to the farm so that the tractor can move through. Futurefarmers is really interested in pirate radio and community radio because it's a bit more scattered like this. You don't have strong signals, you don't have your own antennas. So there's precarity to it, but there's a resilience in that. So we're interested in that. Also, this word in English, propagation, means to plant a seed and let it grow. But also in radio, you're propagating these fields. So I think there's something beautiful and interesting in these two spaces of farming and radio. And then I don't know if you've seen, you have it in Italy too, probably, these frequency allocation maps, which look really like industrialized farming. Mm-hmm. And something else we're interested in Futurefarmers is really the idea of the commons and thinking about these radio waves are there, they're free, and slowly they get enclosed by multinational companies and military. And if you haven't looked at it, you should download the one for Italy. I couldn't find it, but it's pretty intense to see how much is occupied by military and commercial and how these little spaces between we can jump into. I also wanted to talk about the histories that connect to the work we do. And often in art history and media histories, there's these singular masters who've invented something. And we all know how many streets in Italy are named Marconi. But our friend Mr. Marconi here is often given credit for making the first transatlantic transmission. And I love this kite that he used to kind of figure out how to get in contact with the electromagnetic fields. But I like to think about not him, but the other spectrum of people and things that are involved in the making of radio. And I think it's what we try to do in Futurefarmers is think about all of the interdependencies that come together to create something. And that's why Futurefarmers is named Futurefarmers and not Amy Franceschini or Lotte Franken. And it's very hard to kind of keep these identities as an assembly for many reasons. Like right now, I'm giving a talk for 10 people, but I'm curious what you're doing there in terms of community radio and how you imagine that community or the we involved in the making, and how we give agency to all those interdependencies. So then I jump into some projects. Very early on, Futurefarmers was asked to do a project in a forest in Belgium. And so I went as a California person to a forest in Belgium, and all I heard was cars. And we made this little shack in the forest and created a project called Radio Forest. And just to show you like a little bit of how it worked, there's this forest and there's freeways on either side of the forest. And so we proposed to put a sign on the freeway that people could tune in to a radio when they passed the forest. So it'd just be this very short blast of sound that they would get when they went past this forest. But in Belgium, it's very hard to broadcast. It's pretty much illegal. So we contained our broadcast even in a smaller proximity in the forest, this little forest that often has sound festivals. It's called, the project is called Musica. Judith, maybe you've heard of it. Or
I remember what is the name. Musica.
Musica, it's in Neerpelt.
I don't know. I don't know.
They have an annual sound festival and it's quite nice. And it's very small and but it's super nice. And so our project started as temporary, and then
every year. Is it happening every? Yeah, so maybe it can be very interesting also for. Where is it? In Belgium, in a forest.
If Judith, if you write me, I can put you in touch with the.
Okay, so maybe for Robita could be interesting that they get in touch with them.
Yeah. So it started as a temporary project and then it became permanent, and now it's a permanent self-running installation. And what became of it was we ran a workshop and we trained children how to make radios, how to broadcast, how to receive, and how to make recordings. And we also worked with a famous radio voice in this little village, and we made a jingle. Like every radio has like, Radio Instabile, or, radio, welcome to Radio Forest, ding, 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 ding. And so the children made a jingle for this radio station. And then we commissioned people all over the world. We made an open call to send in recordings of natural forests, as wild of forests as possible. So what is in the Radio Forest now is a growing library of audio samples of forests from around the world. And you can check out a radio and go in the forest and not hear the freeway, but you can hear other forests around the world. And it always starts with this jingle, like welcome to Radio Forest. So I also wanted to show a very recent project, and maybe it's just a more traditional use of radio, but I wanted to think about how radio is actually a collaborator for us. And by using radio or working with it, and the production of the content for the radio, it does something to build community and relation. And people actually act differently when they know they will be part of a community radio. And so I think it's a very powerful tool for people to become agents. There's a feeling like a responsibility, I think, when you're talking and you know your voice will be in conversation with others, it will be heard by others. So this was a project in Maine. It's a very northern state on the East Coast in the United States. And currently, after the last Trump elections, the seaweed, the algae farmers are very endangered because all of their farming land is becoming privatized. And there's a dying fishing population. The fisher people have been dying out, and mostly because of environmental regulations, which is good. But the old fishing traditions used natural rope, but the new ones use synthetic rope, and the rope is just everywhere on the coasts, and it's called ghost gear. So it's like ghosts that are on the coast. And so we proposed to do a project of collecting all of this piles of ghost gear and then meeting with people along the coast and asking them about their relationship to this transition of the waterfront and this histories of kelp farming and the future of this industry, basically. And while we talked to them, we wove these pieces back into rope. So it was about repairing and teaching people the craft of splicing. So splicing, but splicing is also what they do in gene transfer. And the future of this coast is actually biogenetically engineered seaweed to use for biofuel. So we were making a play on these on this word and the act of splicing. So in one sense, splicing is repair. In one sense, it's about dividing and monopolizing on nature, depending on your philosophy of synthetic biology. So this was just one day. I put it in really quickly last night. And again, we made this kind of mobile kit that could move through the city and then to various coasts to bring all of the tools we needed and also give people agency to use it in ways that they wanted to. So this is a mobile cart. I also just wanted to share that we often make models when we work. And I think that's again about scale. I was wanting to share a little bit about scale in different ways. And sometimes we ask ourselves, why do we even make these things? Can't they just stay as models and just trigger imaginaries? And that's a question that runs through Futurefarmers often, is why do we always materially manifest things? And when we make models, it gives us a bit of a moment to really question what we're doing, to feel things, and to talk through how things might function. We also often work with many different practitioners. So this is Wei Wang, who came as an artist in residence. He's a paper maker, a printmaker. And he made a series of paper from this rope. So we would crush it. You can't see it here, but he had this stump in the water, and you would crush the rope, and then he would put it in this tray to make paper. And this was displayed in a museum. And then at each location, these different ropes that people would put together were hung on a line, and the project was called Lifelines. And then they were further spliced into a very long rope. I just want to pause for a second and see if there's any questions, because I'd love to just have a little feedback or any, yeah.
Any questions for Emmy now? Not yet.
Okay. Okay. We also have done, I just play this quickly. So we often do workshops in universities. That's one of our favorite places to work. And this was actually a 3-year project at the University of California in Berkeley, in Santa Cruz, where a lot of our friends are, like, let's see. Well, maybe they didn't make it in the book. Yeah, Anna Singh, Donna Haraway. A lot of great people are at this university, and we were invited to create transdisciplinary interaction, and actually to contaminate the disciplines was our invitation. And so we wandered around for a year, just understanding the campus. And we were trying to think, how do we connect people actually? Because they have a problem there where geographically the campus is so dispersed that people do not meet. It doesn't seem like that would happen there, but it really does. So we created this antenna that we would move around and create temporary radio transmissions and receivers and transmitters. And we would use it as a way to just talk to people and then later move it to another part of campus and transmit what we had heard. And this created kind of like this strange cloud on campus, and we called it the fog inquiry. And that's because this region is very foggy, like it can look like this, and then 20 minutes later, completely wet and dripping because it's on the coast. And also to think of this phenomena of fog as a space of potential where things get clouded and proximities are blurred, and that we hope that the academic space can operate in such a space where we don't have strict disciplines and departments that are separated, that we can create a fog that's always ephemeral and changing. So how do you do that as an artwork? We didn't know, but we erected this antenna to see what we could experience. I'll just show this quickly. This was, we worked with Anna Fritz, which I will share a piece of writing with you afterwards. I'll send it. Amazing transmission artist and media theorist there, working a lot with interference as a medium. And so we did a workshop in this field where we had a broadcast. We had a sound broadcast, which was sound waves from outer space from the astronomy department. And then everyone had radios, and you had to be in proximity with each other to hear the broadcast. And if you got out of proximity, it would just be static. So I'll show you. And we had a repeater. If any of you are computer geeks, we had a repeater that was then changing the broadcasts all the time. I'll just.
Perché non sentiamo il suono. We don't hear the sound. Is there a sound, Demi?
I think you won't hear the sound. That's too bad. Okay. It's just, this was,
it's important to hear the sound or not?
I can talk you through it.
Okay.
It was, so basically we had this sound from the radio astronomy department that was basically interference. So the radio astronomy is receiving light waves from outer space so that they can image what they hope is new planets or new stars. And it's actually data. And when it hits the Earth's atmosphere, it gets disrupted and it becomes interference. And they harvest that out so that they can get clear data. So we took the interference and sonified it, and that's what was being broadcast. And so people would have their radios, and when they got together, they could hear the sound. But Anna was more interested in the spaces between, because when you're not in the right proximity, you're actually in this in-between spaces in the radio spectrum. So we were moving around this field and just thinking about our bodily influence on these spaces and how we could change the sound. And this was also a part of campus that nobody goes to. It's this beautiful field. So we were trying to get people out of their fields and into other fields. So I just show you that. And then I jumped to a total another context, which you all know, but Edith and Matteo know, but I just wanted to show again kind of how radio, maybe not the radio itself, but the process of making the content is a medium to connect people. And again, about that agency people have when they think they're going to be on the radio. And I love when when you're in a recording studio, how it says on air.
Mhm.
Okay, so this was in Abruzzo. We were invited by Polinaria to imagine how to keep young people in this region to farm, which is a crazy invitation from California people. But we proposed to make this wandering horse that was human powered, we thought, but it was so hilly, we had to borrow a tractor many times to roam around this region and just ask people what their idea was of the future of farming. And this horse came as a common kind of imaginary from just talking to people in the weeks beforehand about the fact that wild horses used to live here and be free, but because of people coming with their homes and putting fences, they were no longer wild in that area anymore. And so this was something that everyone told us. And so we thought the horse is an important common image that people can relate to. And as we pushed it around, people became groupies and they would follow us and say, oh, you have to go to this village or this fair. And the horse is giving us a reason to talk. We never talk about this. And so the project got momentum enough that we decided to make a show because people wanted this conversation to continue. So we went further, not just in villages, but we went to people's farms that we met on this journey. And these were all older farmers growing very old grains, which were illegal. So they were not certified. And we thought there was something interesting about using pirate radio and using seeds that are not certified, again, in this kind of feral space. Also, all the farmers kept saying their practice or their farming is unstable. The region is unstable economically, environmentally because of climate change, and because all young people are leaving. And so they said, we need to find stability in instability. And we thought that was so beautiful. So we called the radio program Radio Instabile. And we went with Ilaria and Tiziano from Florence. Ilaria is doing Radio Papace, and Tiziano is a professor of media studies. And we invited them because they speak Italian and also are very fluent in the media of radio from a theoretical, but also a practical and content space, to go to these different fields and interview the farmers. And I think it's important also to mention that when we interview people, we try not to just sit in an office and interview them. We try to go into their fields and also offer exchange. So if they give us 3 hours of time, we offer 3 hours of labor or something back. And that also gets you in relation in a different way. Yeah. And so after we did this tour, we had done the horse tour and then we did this radio tour. We also built a broadcasting station on the farm that would bring all the farmers together once a year to listen to these programs. So we launched the program with one story made with Radio Papace and invited people to the farm Polinaria, to this base station, which is a tree house in an old oak grove. And there's lots to say about it, but I just show you. And then we also brought the voices of the farmers to the not the macro, but what's the National Museum of Contemporary Art in Rome?
Macro.
Macro, okay, yeah. Also brought the voices to the macro, and we did transmissions of this show on national radio and then also on pirate radio for 1 week, and brought media theorists and some policymakers in agricultural policy to talk about these seeds that were uncertified and the precarity of the farmers that were growing them. And out of this formed a consortium. So all of those 12 farmers that we met in a way got connected through this project and formed a consortium called Consortium Instabile. And they now have bought a mill together, and they came together to protect themselves growing these uncertified seeds. And Gaetano is now the president of Consortium Instabile. And then I think I'm going to jump ahead and I might jump back. how are we doing on time? We're almost, no, we have some time. Okay.
We have 5 more minutes and then maybe we have a little bit space.
Yeah.
Questions, if there
Okay.
are.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, like what perspective you're all working from. It would be helpful to know, so I know what to show. Like,
No, I can ask.
Yeah, can Alias here, so
Yeah,
you can see you.
I'm at what's it called, questioning. So no, for now, for today, we didn't start yet doing the radio, but we're gonna do it tomorrow, and we're gonna do a group show, which I haven't yet explained to other people who are doing it, so I cannot really explain it to you now because it's gonna be a bit of a surprise. But I actually had a question for you also, maybe to put it a bit, do you always do radio analog, or do you also do web radio and stuff like that? And if not, why not? Or why yes?
okay, that's a good question. So maybe I just jump into this project quickly. This was a recent project we did. And again, it's a bit feral because I haven't organized it so well. But we have been working in Belgium for several years, and we recently, oops, hang on, sorry, we recently built a boat, this crazy boat, that was, the main use of it was to transport food from the outside of, here's Brussels, and then here's this region where a lot of food is grown. It's very close to Brussels. I mean, this is an old rendering, but Brussels is very special because the farmlands are very close. But there's so much traffic to get there that the farmers sit in traffic for hours to take the food to the city. So we proposed to use the pre-existing infrastructure, which I like to compare to the electromagnetic field. It's there, we can use it. Of course, the canal is a bit different, but it's there. And so how do we use this in a different way and kind of introduce small craft rather than these large crafts bringing global trade in and out? And so I just walk you through it quickly. It's this floating platform that's made using reed roof. There's a picture of it in the city amidst all of this global trade. And what we were trying to do is introduce this year and then see what kind of actors could come together to keep it going in perpetuity as a platform for delivering food, but also for artistic platforms, debates, workshops, etc. And so that we started it the first year this year with film screenings, delivering food, and a debate which we streamed on live, but then it's now archived on the internet. And we've done this in the past, and I think, again, I think the streaming is really important because it reaches a broader audience than just live radio. The archiving is a beautiful part. I think then what Futurefarmers gets into are what are the tools we're using to archive? What are the platforms? Like, are we using Google? Are we using, what are we using, and how can we think about that whole ecology? So in Belgium, for one of the evenings, we hosted a debate with politicians, people from mobility, people from food politicians, media theorists, bike cargo messengers, farmers, and agroecologists, and Radio Panique, which is a Belgian Brussels radio, and Radio Libre, and 2 translators translating in French, English, and Dutch. And we work with my collaborator Marta van Dessel here, who's very much into like a feminist idea of radio, and she's interested in this idea of very local radio and the precarity of it and interfaces which kind of bring together lots of different actors. And so this was just a schematic of how this evening worked. So it's quite complicated. We had 3 different languages, So we set up an interface that had color-coded microphones. So if you were speaking English, you'd pick up the green microphone. If you were speaking French, the yellow. She explained it to everyone. It was sort of this quick download. And I think at first, I might show a video, but, and also we were inside the belly of this food delivery vessel. So on the sides are apples that we were going to deliver the next day. And I think that's something we try to do in Futurefarmers, is like bring things together that don't maybe make sense, and to be really in the belly of the situation you're talking about. So these were apples that were actually destroyed by a hailstorm very early in the season, so they couldn't be sold as edible apples. So you're in this kind of concern and this situation while you're talking to a broader audience. So this was sort of the setup. We had the debate in the front of the boat. We had speakers outside because only 16 people could be in the boat. So we had speakers outside and people were sitting outside with headphones to listen. And then we had this whole setup going, and I wonder how we can have sound. If it doesn't work, I can also send this to you later.
Do you painting of Van Gogh? You know, he has.
Let's see.
Yeah, we
Works, yeah.
hear.
So I just tell you what she's doing. So these are all politicians, and some are pretty like never dealt with art before. And Marta's explaining how this evening is going to go and why we're using this very low frequency radio. And she's again comparing this Van Gogh scattering of seeds to industrialized farming and the enclosure of the radio commons. So I hope you can hear a little.
The painting of Van Gogh, you know, he has this bag. Broadcasting would be where the seeds would land, they would grow, and they wouldn't be in an industrial way in these rooms. I know we are in agricultural commons, so to understand why we are doing that, it's a more feminist approach to broadcasting and radio, because we believe that everybody also has to come into the electromagnetic spectrum and also take the place and the voice. That's why this debate doesn't stay within this boat, but we try to get it out. This is the Radio Panic crew. We try to get it live out to Radio Panic.
Okay. And so I think there's also, again, something that happens, like if you have a debate and it's in an auditorium, I mean, we do broadcast it now, but it's a different agency than when you say, like, very clearly it's going out to people, we don't know who it is. She also introduced that it's a very fragile network. So we also had headphones on because we had to hear the translations. And if we moved our bodies, sometimes it would go out of, you wouldn't hear it anymore. It would be like, and she was very into that. Like, we need to stay like in proximity to stay together. And so there's something about the force of that was interesting. And then in the middle of the session, someone came in and said, everybody outside is only hearing African dance music on their channel. And Marta said, it's okay, let's go with it. Like, and so basically what happened was another frequency jumped on our receiver, and it was like this dance party. And if you go to the archive, you can hear this one little section. So that wasn't a way to answer your question.
Yeah.
But I think maybe I just see if you have any questions, and I can go other directions, but I think it's nice to hear what you're thinking about or why people there are gathered around this workshop.
I have another question, and it's maybe a bit related to what we presented, and a little bit our approach in general. So I'm also, as Aljaž, part of this Robida collective. I think that most of our presentation was related to the fact that, and also the radio project that we have, it's our own community radio, and a lot of what we presented today was about, staying in a place and doing things from that place, and this idea of also permanence and doing something within the community, which can be scattered, but it's still, in a way, doing things for ourselves, and then, of course, broadcast them in a way, while what you showed us, which is super interesting to learn also, I didn't know about all these projects, is about projects that you did in other communities or in other situations or where you were invited. So my question was, and I don't know if you have something also prepared about it, or if you have something to say about this, how about if you have something about your practice within your own community of future farmers in a way. So not when you are invited to go and do things here and there, but how is your, if the radio as a medium enters also your own work somehow, or research within the group itself. Because I understand that it's a super interesting tool to work with when you go somewhere and when you work with someone, because it's easy in a way. It's also, maybe comprehensible. Everyone has a relation to it. It's interesting because it's very material somehow, also this analog radio. But yeah, I was interested if you have something in relation to your own community or where you live. I don't know. Thank you.
That's a complicated question of where we live and what our community. And I think it relates to the proposal of thinking about proxemics and scale, because Future Farmers is an international network of people. We live and work in San Francisco, Italy, Brussels. I would say San Francisco and Brussels are our, let's say, most close proximities of home. But maybe I show you a picture a little bit. I did think about the history of San Francisco and the making of Future Farmers, because we did evolve in a very particular place and time, which is Silicon Valley is very close to San Francisco. We grew up in the internet boom. Future Farmers was a design studio. We did the first websites that ever had images on them or moving images. And it was this time of pioneering and quite an exciting time to think of the internet as a tool for liberation and just communication tools in general, and at the same time how enclosed they are and how privatized they become so fast. So I do relate the internet to radio a lot. So your question of streaming is interesting. But this was an exhibition in our early days. We were invited into a gaming show at the local contemporary art museum. They were doing a show about gaming culture, and it was sponsored by the military. Because in the United States, there is a game called America's Army. Has anyone heard of it?
Amy, when was it? Which year?
This was 1998. America's Army was a video game made by Disney and the United States Army.
Wait.
And it was the main thing in the exhibition. And it was a recruiting tool for kids in high school. So they would go to public schools and have a table, the United States Army, and give this game away. And it's basically the territory of Iraq before the Gulf War, trying to recruit people, the second Gulf War, trying to recruit people into the army. And we said, we do not want to be in this exhibition, but we want to be part of a critical conversation about video games, the military industrial complex. So we asked for a room outside of the museum where people did not have to pay admission, and a private donor gave us money to do this. So we installed a 6-week workshop called Play Shop. And at the time we were teaching media theory at the local art school, San Francisco Art Institute, which has now closed. And we often ran into a problem working with young women, that they didn't have the same kind of speed in learning tools as boys. And that's just because in our educational system and our parenting, often boys are given a hammer before a girl is, or taught electronics. And so we set up a whole bunch of workshops, but we set up this place to have freedom for other people to propose workshops within it. And so this was just a a workshop with several women we were working with at the art school. And we worked with a local programmer and computer nerd to build our own computers in cardboard boxes. And so we just, at the time in San Francisco, it was crazy here. It was super rich. People were throwing computers on the street, scanners. I mean, you could walk down the street and just start a design studio. So we did a derive and we collected electronic waste and we built these computers. This one is one of them. And then the women started a band with all of the waste, and they built their own synthesizers and started to perform in the space. We also invited a famous chess player to walk through the history of the game of chess and the moment when the computer first beat a human. So IBM Deep Blue beat Kasparov, which was, you know, the world famous chess player. And this was a big moment in technology as well. It was IBM's stocks went up. Faith in the computer really began to happen. And so we used this moment to really consider what are these tools and how much influence and who owns these tools. So we played, we replayed this game, and this man, Steve Brandwine, explained what happened to Kasparov egotistically in the game that made him lose, and where computers maybe don't have egos, or it got into a very interesting conversation. We also, at the time, this was early 1996, the AT&T and all these phone companies were putting in wires to have internet. But as you know, the wires are all the same size. They're all fast, but they slow them down and charge you, you know, different rates depending on the speed you get, which is should be illegal. So we invited people to bring cans from their homes, just like coffee cans or chocolate cans, and we made our own cantinas to broadcast the signal from the museum out to the public park so people could have free internet. And we taught people how to make these cantinas so they could do it anywhere. So basically, if you want, you can broadcast your signal much further than your telephone company thinks you can or wishes you can. And what happened, because it was a free space, people would come in, and we started to get these kind of groupies or locals that would come and with skills. So there was a man who knew how to solder, and he started to help people. People heard we had built synthesizers, so bands started to come. And we were really interested in how do we demystify these tools? And I think, again, with the community radio, it can take several forms. There's like the social exchange, the content making, but then I think for us, the tools are also very important in thinking about, you know, this idea that radio is free as air and water. It's there. And how does that influence even how we're talking about what we're doing? And I'll just show a last little experiment because it was fun. We were also thinking about the energy consumption it takes to use the tools we use. And since this exhibition was about gaming, we took a Game Boy and we programmed a little tiny game called Galvani versus Volta, which there's a debate on who invented the voltage, Galvani or Volta. Volta gets a lot of the credit, but and so it was just a silly little game, and then we wanted to see if we could power it on lemon power. And so we plugged in one lemon and we got like a little flash of the screen. So we thought, if we get a whole bunch of lemon trees, we can wire them and it'll go forever. And what we learned in this was actually one lemon has the same power of one lemon on a lemon tree. But if you take the lemons off and put them in parallel in series, you actually get amplified voltage. So that was like this kind of wow moment where you're like, wow, a tree shares the same electrolytes. It's one being. Mm-hmm. When you separate them, they become this, you know, field of voltage and energy. So it was a lot of experiments there, and it kind of set off a type of work that we still continue to do, which is trying to create these spaces of learning and experimenting, and creating the space for not knowing what's going to happen.